On a bustling autumn morning in Manhattan, Michael Harrison, CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the United States, was driving his Bentley down Fifth Avenue. At 45, he had achieved everything money could buy, but something always seemed to be missing in his seemingly perfect life. The cloudy sky and golden leaves dancing in the air seemed to foreshadow a significant change in his meticulously planned routine. At the corner of 57th Street, while waiting for the light to turn green, his eyes were drawn to a scene that stood out from the opulence around him. A young woman, probably in her early 30s, sat on the sidewalk with two small twins asleep in her lap. Her clothes were worn but clean, and there was a dignity in her posture that didn't match her current situation. That's when something caught his attention, a small glimmer on her right hand. A ring. Not just any ring, but one he knew very well. A silver ring with a small blue sapphire made by a local craftsman from a small town in Maine. The same ring he had given to Sarah Collins 15 years ago before choosing his career over love. Michael's heart skipped a beat. That woman, it couldn't be. Sarah had pursued a career as a teacher, had plans, dreams. How could she be there? The light turned green, but he couldn't move. The drivers behind him started honking, annoyed at his hesitation, abruptly parking. His car in the first spot he found, Michael walked back to the corner, his heart pounding in his chest. The closer he got, the more certain he became. It was Sarah. Time had left its marks, but those green eyes, now tired, still carried the same intensity that had captivated him during college. The twins, a boy and a girl of about 5 years old, slept peacefully, oblivious to the drama unfolding. Sarah looked up when Michael's shadow covered her small space on the sidewalk. For a moment their eyes met, and 15 years of untold stories seemed to flow between them. Sarah. His voice came out weaker than he intended. She recognized him immediately, her eyes widening in a mixture of surprise, shame, and something else. Perhaps hope. "Michael?" she whispered, instinctively pulling the children closer to her. The contrast between them couldn't have been more stark. He in his tailored Italian suit, she wrapped in a worn coat, trying to protect her children from New York's autumn chill. 15 years had transformed their lives in drastically opposite directions, and now fate was reuniting them in the most unexpected way possible. Michael and Sarah's story had begun at the University of Maine, where both were promising scholarship students. Michael, the son of a bankrupt mechanic, had vowed never to go through the financial hardships that marked his childhood. Sarah, in turn, came from a family of teachers and carried the dream of transforming lives through education. The present moment on the Manhattan sidewalk seemed a cruel irony of fate. Michael gestured to a nearby cafe. "Can we talk, please?" His voice betrayed a mixture of guilt and concern. Sarah hesitated, looking at the sleeping children. "The cafe has a private area," he quickly added. "The kids can rest comfortably." In the cozy interior of the establishment, away from the curious glances of passers-by, the story began to unfold. Sarah had become a teacher at a public school in the Bronx, fulfilling her initial dream. She married a promising stockbroker, Thomas, who seemed to share her values. The twins, Emma and Ethan, were born 5 years ago. Thomas started drinking after he lost everything in the financial crisis, she explained, her fingers nervously playing with the ring. That same ring Michael had bought with 3 months' salary from his part-time job in college. "First it was our savings, then the house, then our dignity." Michael watched the twins sleeping on the booth sofa. Emma had Sarah's same upturned nose, while Ethan wore a serious expression even in his sleep. Children who should be in elementary school, not on the streets of Manhattan. "The shelters are always full," Sarah continued, her voice low to avoid waking the children. "And many are dangerous for women alone with kids. I try to keep the twins clean and attending public school when I can, but..." Her voice faltered. Michael, meanwhile, had built his tech empire from scratch. Harrison Tech had revolutionized the digital security market, and every tough decision he'd made along the way was justified by success, including leaving Sarah when he received the offer to work in Silicon Valley, an opportunity he considered once in a lifetime. The coffee between them grew cold, untouched. Through the cafe window, the city continued its frenzied pace, indifferent to the drama unfolding inside. A world of contrasts. Outside, executives rushed by with their expensive laptops, while inside, a former teacher struggled to keep her children fed. "Why did you keep the ring?" The question escaped Michael's lips before he could stop it. Sarah touched the small sapphire fondly. "It reminds me of a time when I believed anything was possible. When we sold everything, I couldn't part with it. This ring represents the person I used to be, the dreams I had." The barista discreetly approached with a tray of sandwiches. "On the house," he murmured. But Michael knew it was his corporate credit card that would be charged. He watched as Sarah tucked half a sandwich into her bag, presumably for later. Few blocks away, the skyscraper housing Harrison Tech's headquarters towered imposingly against the autumn sky. On the 45th floor, Michael's office offered a panoramic view of the city, a symbol of everything he had achieved. But sitting in that cafe, facing Sarah and her children, all those accomplishments seemed hollow. "Let me help," Michael finally said, breaking the silence that had settled between them. Sarah's reaction was immediate, a stiffening of the shoulders, a defensive glint in her eyes. "I don't need charity, Michael, especially not yours." Her voice, though soft, to avoid waking. The children carried years of pent-up hurt. "I've learned to manage on my own. It's not charity, Sarah, it's..." He hesitated, searching for the right words. "It's a chance to fix something I messed up a long time ago." At that moment, Emma began to stir, her green eyes identical to her mother's, opening slowly. "Mom," she mumbled sleepily, "where are we?" "Somewhere safe, sweetie," Sarah answered, stroking her daughter's hair. The girl noticed Michael and studied him with childlike curiosity. "You're wearing a suit like Dad's in the old pictures," Emma observed innocently, causing an uncomfortable silence at the table. The situation became even more complicated when the cafe manager discreetly approached Michael. "Mr. Harrison, there are some TMZ reporters outside. Apparently someone recognized you coming in with..." He hesitated, looking at Sarah and the children. Michael cursed under his breath. His personal life had always been the subject of media speculation, especially after his divorce the previous year had become national headlines. The last thing Sarah and the children needed was to become the latest social media scandal. "There's an exit through the back," the manager offered, sensing the tension. Sarah began hurriedly gathering her things. "This was a mistake," she muttered. "I can't expose my children to this." "Sarah, wait." Michael tried to intervene, but she was already waking Ethan. "I have an empty apartment in the Upper East Side. You and the kids can stay there until..." "Until when, Michael?" Sarah interrupted, her voice shaking. "Until you decide you have something more important to do again? Until the media creates stories about how billionaire Michael Harrison has a homeless mistress with 2 kids." The words hit Michael like a punch. Outside, flashes were starting to illuminate the cafe windows. "Mom, I'm scared," Ethan whispered, clinging to Sarah's leg. The boy, who had remained quiet until then, was trembling slightly. Michael observed the scene with a tightness in his chest. In his years building his empire, he had learned to deal with corporate crises, multi-million-dollar negotiations, and attacks from competitors. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. "Sarah," he said, his voice taking on the decisive tone he used in board meetings, "you're right not to trust me, I've earned that. But this isn't about us now. It's about Emma and Ethan." He took out his phone and made a quick call. "Janet, cancel my appointments for the next few days, and tell Richard to bring the car around to the back of Café Lucerne, now." Turning back to Sarah, he continued, "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm just asking you to trust that I can keep you safe tonight. After that, if you want to leave, I'll understand." The sound of more flashes and voices grew louder outside. Sarah looked at her children, tired, scared, and confused, and then at the ring on her finger. 15 years ago, she had entrusted her dreams to Michael Harrison. Now she needed to decide if she would entrust him with her children's safety. "One night," she finally said. "Just one night." Michael nodded, knowing he had only a few hours to prove he had changed, that he was no longer the ambitious young man who had chosen success over love. But first, He needed to get this family out of here without turning them into national headlines. The apartment in the Upper East Side was exactly as one might expect. Spacious, elegant, and completely impersonal. Sarah observed the white walls, decorated with modern art, while Emma and Ethan, now more relaxed, timidly explored the space. "I never really lived here," Michael explained, watching the children. "It's more of an investment." He paused, realizing how that sounded. Another reminder of the chasm that now existed between them. As the children settled into the guest room, Michael's phone rang insistently. Janet, his assistant, was dealing with an unexpected crisis. Thomas, Sarah's ex-husband, had found out about the cafe meeting through social media and was giving interviews to tabloids. "He's saying you stole the kids from him," Michael gently informed Sarah after hanging up the phone, "that he's been looking for you for months." Sarah paled. "He abandoned us a year ago, when we lost everything. He showed up twice after that. Drunk, demanding money we didn't have." Her hands were shaking. "The last time he tried to take the children by force. That's when we ran." In the next room, they could hear Emma humming as she explored the empty closet, her childish voice echoing through the house. Ethan had found a forgotten tablet in a drawer and was absorbed in an educational game. "I need to protect my children, Michael. I can't let him find them." Michael looked out the window at the Manhattan buildings, his mind working quickly. He had resources, connections, power. Everything he had built over the last 15 years could finally serve a greater purpose than simply accumulating more wealth. But there was another complication. Caroline, his ex-wife and current board member of Harrison Tech, had already sent 3 messages demanding explanations about the photos that were starting to circulate online. Their divorce had been amicable, but that could change if she decided. Michael was risking the company's reputation. "Sarah," he began, carefully choosing his words, "I have a house in Vermont, completely isolated with private security. You could—" "I can't accept that," she interrupted. "I already feel humiliated enough for needing your help tonight." "Mom," Emma called from the bedroom, "there's a huge bathtub here. Can we take a bath?" Sarah's face softened at hearing her daughter's enthusiasm, but her eyes remained worried. "How long until Thomas finds out where we are?" As if answering her question, Michael's cell phone vibrated with a notification. Thomas had given a live interview to a local TV show, claiming that Michael Harrison had kidnapped his family. "Things are going to get worse before they get better," Michael admitted, "but I promise I won't disappear this time. I won't choose my career over—" He stopped, realizing he was about to say something too big for the moment. In the silence that followed, the sound of the children's laughter echoed through the apartment. It was a strange sound in that usually empty space, but somehow it felt right. "1 week," Sarah finally said. "We can stay for 1 week, long enough to sort out the legal situation with Thomas. After that—" She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. They both knew there was much more at stake than just temporary shelter. 3 days passed in the Upper East Side apartment. Michael had transformed the office into his temporary command center, coordinating both Harrison Tech affairs and the growing media storm involving Sarah and the children. But it was an unexpected call that changed everything. "Mr. Harrison?" The voice of the private detective he had hired sounded urgent. "We found something about Thomas that you need to see immediately." Half an hour later, Michael was staring at a series of documents on his laptop, his face pale. Thomas hadn't just lost money in the stock market. He had embezzled funds from the school where Sarah worked, using her access to the system to forge accounts. Sarah didn't know, but her name was linked to the falsified documents. "He set me up," Sarah whispered, when Michael finally shared the discovery. She was sitting on the edge of the sofa, her hands trembling as she held the papers. "That's why." He kept coming back, demanding more money. "He knew I'd be blamed if everything came to light." "Mom?" Ethan was standing in the doorway, hugging his new teddy bear, a gift Michael had sent over the day before. "Why are you crying?" Before Sarah could answer, the apartment intercom buzzed. It was Janet, Michael's assistant, her voice laden with concern. "Mr. Harrison, the police are here. They have a warrant." Time seemed to freeze. Sarah grabbed Ethan, her eyes wide with panic. Emma, who had been coloring at the kitchen table, sensed the tension and began to cry silently. It was then that Michael Harrison did something that surprised even himself. Years of corporate negotiations and calculated decisions had built his reputation as a cold and rational man. But at that moment, seeing the terror in Sarah's eyes and the children's tears, he acted on instinct. "Janet, stall them," he ordered, through the intercom. Turning to Sarah, he spoke quickly. "Trust me one last time." He ran to his office and came back with a folder. "This is a signed confession from me, taking full responsibility for a fraud scheme involving Thomas. It says, I hired him to carry out illegal operations, and that you knew nothing about it." "Michael, no," Sarah protested, understanding what he intended. "This will destroy everything you've built." "Maybe it's time to build something new," he replied, a sad smile on his lips. "Something that really matters." The sound of voices in the hallway grew louder. Michael knelt in front of the twins. "Emma, Ethan, you're very brave. Take care of your mom, okay?" Emma, with wisdom beyond her years, impulsively hugged Michael. "Will you visit us in jail like in the movies?" Michael felt his heart tighten. "No one's going to jail, sweetheart, I promise." Turning to Sarah, he took a card from his pocket. "Caroline, my ex-wife. She's the best corporate lawyer in the city. She'll help you clear your name. She always knew I never loved her like I loved you." The sound of knocking echoed through the apartment. Sarah, with tears in her eyes, did something that surprised them both. She took the sapphire ring off her finger and placed it in Michael's hand. "Keep it," she said softly, "to give back to me when this is all over." Michael nodded, putting the ring in his pocket as he walked to the door. Before opening it, he looked one last time at the unlikely family fate had brought back into his life. In 15 years of building his empire, he had never felt as rich as he did at that moment, about to lose everything. The door opened, revealing 2 detectives and a team of officers. Michael Harrison, the billionaire CEO of Harrison Tech, raised his hands with a serene smile. "Gentlemen," he said calmly, "I believe I have a confession to make." The news of Michael Harrison's arrest exploded like a bomb on Wall Street. Harrison Tech's stock plummeted 30% in the first hours of trading, and the media went into a frenzy. But to everyone's surprise, Caroline Harrison Mills, Michael's ex-wife and current legal director of the company, took control of the situation with surgical precision. "My ex-husband," she declared in an impromptu press conference, "has always been a man of principles higher than those of the financial market. If he confessed to something, I'm sure there's more to this story than the tabloids are showing." Behind the scenes, Caroline met with Sarah in her private office. "So you're the famous Sarah," she said with no bitterness in her voice. "Michael kept your picture in his wallet throughout our entire marriage. I always knew it was you." Sarah, still stunned by the events, watched Emma and Ethan playing with toys in the corner of Caroline's office. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't want him to sacrifice everything." "Michael didn't sacrifice anything," Caroline interrupted, an enigmatic smile on her lips. "He finally found something worth fighting for. Now, let's get down to business." Caroline revealed that her legal team had spent the entire night tracking Thomas's activities. They uncovered a pattern of fraud that extended far beyond the school where Sarah worked. Thomas had left a trail of financial destruction across several educational institutions. "Your ex-husband isn't very smart," Caroline commented, flipping through a thick folder. "He kept all the receipts for fraudulent transactions in a poorly protected email account. Amateur." At the detention center where Michael was held, things were also moving quickly. His confession was full of purposeful inconsistencies that any experienced prosecutor would notice. It was obvious he was protecting someone, and the evidence against Thomas was starting to pile up. "Do you understand that obstruction of justice is a serious crime?" the investigator asked Michael during the interrogation. "I understand perfectly," Michael replied, playing with the sapphire ring in his pocket. "I also understand that sometimes we need to choose between what's legal and what's right." Meanwhile, the story took an unexpected turn on social media. The Justice for Sarah started trending when the true story of a dedicated teacher forced into homelessness by a fraudulent husband began to circulate. Sarah's former students emerged with emotional testimonials about how she had changed their lives. "Your mum is a hero," Caroline told the twins as they waited for news in her office. And sometimes heroes need someone to fight for them. Emma, who had quickly grown attached to Caroline, innocently asked, "Will Uncle Michael be okay?" Caroline smiled, checking her phone once more. "Sweetie, your Uncle Michael has never been better." The truth was that, for the first time in 15 years, Michael Harrison wasn't thinking about stocks, contracts, or corporate mergers. In his cell, he held the sapphire ring up to the light, remembering the moment he bought it, Sarah's smile when she received it, and how sometimes you need to lose everything to find what really matters. A week later, the truth came out like an avalanche. Thomas was arrested in Las Vegas trying to pull off a new scam at a private school. The evidence collected by Caroline's team was irrefutable, and Michael's forced confession was quickly dismissed by the court. When Michael finally left the detention center, he found Sarah waiting for him. She was different, no longer the frightened woman from the sidewalk, but someone who had regained her dignity. "You didn't have to do that," she said as they walked through the nearby park. "Put everything at risk for us." "Actually, I did," Michael replied, watching Emma and Ethan playing on the nearby playground, now dressed in new clothes and genuine smiles. "You know, I spent 15 years building something I thought would make me happy. But seeing you on that sidewalk, I realized I was building the wrong things." Caroline had done more than clear Sarah's name. She had secured a teaching position for her at one of Manhattan's best private schools, with full salary and retroactive benefits. "Consider it compensation for emotional damages," Caroline had said with a wink. The most surprising transformation, however, wasn't in the external circumstances, but in the people involved. Michael, known for his work obsession, began reorganizing Harrison Tech. He created a foundation to help teachers in financial difficulty and implemented a scholarship program for underprivileged children. "Didn't the company go bankrupt without you micromanaging everything?" Sarah joked one day as they had lunch together. "Surprisingly, it's doing better than ever," he replied. "I guess I needed to learn to loosen control a bit." The twins also flourished. Ethan, previously shy and scared, discovered a talent for math and programming, spending hours with Michael learning about computers. Emma, in turn, revealed herself to be a natural artist, filling the walls of Sarah's new apartment with colorful drawings. "Mum, why don't you and Uncle Michael date?" Emma asked one day, with the brutal honesty of children. Sarah blushed, but Michael noticed she didn't immediately deny the possibility. The media, of course, wasted no time creating romantic narratives about the billionaire and the teacher. But this time, neither Sarah nor Michael cared about the spotlight. They were too busy rebuilding, not just their lives, but the trust that had been broken 15 years ago. "You know what's funny?" Michael commented one night while helping Ethan with his science project. "I spent years thinking success meant having control over everything. Now I realize sometimes you need to lose control to find what really matters." Sarah, who was grading school papers at the table next to them, looked up with a smile. "And what really matters, Mr. Harrison?" Michael took the sapphire ring out of his pocket, the same one he had carried during his brief stint in prison. "This," he said simply, placing the ring on the table between them, "and this time I promise not to let it slip away." Emma, pretending not to be listening while drawing, gave a knowing smile. Ethan pretended to be absorbed in his project, but his ears were red with emotion. The family they were building wasn't conventional, nor did it follow the scripts society expected. It was imperfect, complicated, and sometimes confusing, but it was real as the sapphire ring that now rested between them, waiting for a new beginning. 3 months had passed since Thomas's arrest. Life had found a new rhythm, but one question still lingered in the air. The sapphire ring remained on Sarah's coffee table, untouched, a silent symbol of unrealized possibilities. Harrison Tech was about to launch its biggest initiative yet, a national educational technology program for schools in underprivileged areas, directly inspired by Sarah's experience. Michael had dedicated half of his personal fortune to the project, something that would have been unthinkable for the old Michael. "The board is nervous," Caroline commented during a meeting. "They think you're letting emotions interfere with business." Maybe it's time they understand that business without emotion is just empty numbers, Michael replied, signing the last documents for the project. At home, Sarah faced her own dilemmas. The school where she now taught had offered her the position of director of the special education department, a position she had always dreamed of, but one that would demand even more of her time. The twins, now flourishing in their new school, seemed to have an intuition about the changes approaching. One night, as Sarah was putting them to bed, Emma asked the question everyone had been avoiding. "Mom, are we ever going to be a real family?" The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken expectations and fears. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, her heart racing with possibilities. On the same night, Michael received a phone call that would change everything. Thomas, from prison, had managed to get an ambitious lawyer who threatened to expose alleged old irregularities at Harrison Tech in exchange for a deal. "He's bluffing," Caroline assured. But he can create a scandal big enough to affect the launch of the educational program, Michael completed, running his hands over his tired face. The news reached Sarah through the newspapers. For the first time since the whole story began, she saw Michael truly vulnerable, not because of the risk to his reputation or fortune, but because of the possibility of seeing his education project harmed. That's when Sarah made a decision. Taking the sapphire ring from the coffee table, she put it in her purse. It was time to stop letting the past dictate the future. Meanwhile, the media began speculating about the possible scandal. Harrison Tech stocks were dangerously fluctuating, and investors were pressing for answers. "You could lose everything," Sarah told Michael during a tense dinner. "I've lost everything once," he replied, his eyes meeting hers. "It was the best thing that ever happened to me." The twins, sensing the tension in the air, did something unexpected. Emma brought her sketchbook, showing a series of portraits of our family. Sarah, herself, Ethan, Michael, and even Caroline appeared in some, always with her characteristic knowing smile. "Look, Mom," Ethan pointed to one of the drawings. "Emma drew the ring on your finger." The moment was interrupted by Michael's phone, another corporate emergency demanding his attention. But before he could answer, Sarah placed her hand over his. "Some emergencies," she said softly, "can wait." The air was charged with expectation. 15 years of history, 3 months of reconnection, and an entire future of possibilities converged on this moment. The morning of the big launch of Harrison Tech's educational program dawned with a light rain over Manhattan. Michael adjusted, his tie in front of the mirror, his tired eyes reflecting the sleepless nights of the past few weeks. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists, investors, board members, all wanting answers about Thomas's allegations. "Are you ready?" Caroline asked, entering Michael's office. Her expression was one of genuine concern, something rare for the always composed lawyer. "As ready as I'll ever be," Michael replied, picking up his briefcase. "Where's Sarah?" she said. "She'd meet us there," Caroline answered, an enigmatic smile on her lips. The auditorium at Columbia University was packed. Educators, politicians, journalists, and curious onlookers crowded in, waiting not just for the announcement of the educational program, but also for some statement about the alleged scandal. Michael took the stage, silence falling over the crowd. He looked at the expectant faces, searching for one in particular, but didn't find it. 15 years ago, he began, his voice echoing through the speakers. "I made a decision. I chose business success over love. I thought I was building something great, but in reality, I was losing what really mattered." Murmurs rippled through the audience. This wasn't the corporate speech everyone had expected. "Recently, I've been accused of irregularities in my company," Michael continued, his voice firm. "These accusations come from a man who defrauded the educational system, harming countless children in the process. He expects me to make a deal to silence the truth to protect my reputation." The auditorium was in absolute silence now. "But I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to announce that Harrison Tech is donating 75% of its annual profits to create a permanent technology education fund for schools in underprivileged areas." Exclamations of surprise and some spontaneous applause erupted from the audience. "If This means I'll lose control of the company I built, so be it. Because I've learned that there are things more important than money or power. Michael stopped abruptly. At the entrance of the auditorium, Sarah appeared, the twins by her side. She nodded encouragingly, a smile lighting up her face. With renewed conviction, Michael continued, "There's love, there's family. There's the chance to make a real difference in people's lives. And that's what this program represents." As Michael detailed the plans for the program, Sarah and the children approached the stage. The media immediately turned their cameras to them, recognizing the woman who had been at the center of controversy months ago. As he concluded his presentation, Michael stepped down from the stage amid a storm of applause and flashes. But he only had eyes for Sarah and the children. "You came," he said, his voice almost a whisper. Sarah smiled, taking something out of her pocket. The sapphire ring glittered under the auditorium lights. "I thought it was time to return this," she said. Michael looked at the ring, then at Sarah, confused. "I don't understand." 15 years ago you gave me this ring as a promise of a future together," Sarah explained, her voice trembling slightly. "Today I'm returning it because I want you to make that promise again. Not as the Michael from 15 years ago, but as the man you've become." Emma and Ethan watched the scene, holding hands, their eyes shining with anticipation. Michael took the ring, feeling its weight. Not just the physical weight, but the weight of all the decisions, mistakes, and redemptions that had brought them to this moment. Completely ignoring the cameras, reporters, and the crowd around them, Michael knelt down. "Sarah Collins," he said, his voice laden with emotion, "would you do me the honor of building a future together? Not just the two of us, but as a family." The auditorium erupted in applause as Sarah, with tears in her eyes, extended her hand. Michael slid the ring onto her finger, and in that moment 15 years of separation seemed to disappear. Emma and Ethan threw themselves at them, turning the moment into a family hug. Caroline, watching from the side of the stage, discreetly wiped away a tear. The story of the billionaire and the homeless teacher had reached its climax, not with scandals or corporate deals, but with a renewed promise of love and a commitment to a better future, not just for them, but for countless children who would benefit from their journey of redemption. A year passed since that memorable day at Columbia University's auditorium. Harrison Tech's educational program had become a resounding success, transforming the lives of thousands of students across the country. Thomas's accusations had been completely discredited, and he remained in prison, his blackmail attempt having failed miserably. Michael and Sarah got married in an intimate ceremony in Central Park, with Emma and Ethan as ring bearer and flower girl. Caroline, to everyone's surprise, brought Janet, Michael's former assistant, as her date, revealing a romance that had blossomed behind the scenes of the crisis. Harrison Tech, under Michael's new leadership, now more focused on social impact than exorbitant profits, saw its stock rise to record levels. Investors and the public recognized the value of a company that put purpose above profit. Sarah, now the director of the Special Education Department, implemented innovative programs that became a model for schools across the country. Her story of overcoming inspired a generation of educators to never give up, no matter how difficult circumstances might seem. Emma and Ethan, now 6 years old, were thriving in their new reality. Ethan had won a national math competition for his age group, while Emma had her first painting exhibited in a children's art gallery. On a Sunday afternoon, the newly formed family was strolling through the same park where Michael and Sarah had reunited a year earlier. Emma ran ahead, chasing soap bubbles that Ethan was blowing, their laughter echoing through the air. "Do you regret it?" Sarah asked, her hand intertwined with Michael's, the sapphire ring gleaming under the autumn sun. Michael looked at her, then at the children, a serene smile on his face. "Regret what? Losing control of the company? Donating most of my fortune?" Sarah nodded, a touch of concern in her eyes. "Not for a second," Michael replied, squeezing her hand. "I discovered that true wealth isn't in bank accounts or stocks. It's here in this moment with you all." At that instant, as if to illustrate his point, Emma came running back, throwing herself into Michael's arms. "Daddy, come make bubbles with us." The term daddy, still new, made Michael's heart leap. Sarah watched, moved as he ran to join the children, his laughter mingling with theirs. There in that park in Manhattan, far from the skyscrapers and boardrooms, Michael Harrison finally found the true meaning of success. It wasn't measured in dollars or stocks, but in moments like this, full of love, joy, and the promise of a bright future built together. 5 years later, Michael and Sarah Harrison's legacy continued to grow. Harrison Tech's educational program had expanded internationally, touching lives on 5 continents. Emma, now 11, had become a promising young artist, while Ethan was developing his first educational app. On a sunny morning, Sarah found Michael in his home office, contemplating an old photo of them in college. "Thinking about the past?" she asked, placing a cup of coffee beside him. Michael smiled, pulling her close. "No. Thinking about how the future has surpassed all my past dreams." Outside, the children's laughter echoed, a perfect melody for their story of redemption and renewed love.